Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Week in Nintendo. Every Saturday, I like to go back through the past week's biggest headlines so you can get yourself all caught up on all things Nintendo. If you're new here and you like these weekly news rundowns, as well as the occasional game or accessory review, make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on everything happening with the channel. And with all that out of the way, let's go through this week's Nintendo news. On Monday, we learned from an IGN interview with an Atlas Games communications manager that fans of the Persona series shouldn't give up hope yet on Persona 5 making its way over to the Switch. The employee went further by saying, "We're listening, keep telling us what you want," but she did admit that she's not really a decision maker when it comes to situations like these, even though she's been an internal champion for the port. So, take her statements with a grain of salt, but it does certainly seem like something that could happen since we have Joker and Smash, we have Persona 5 Scramble on the way to Switch, and then we had that recent Japanese Atlas survey where they asked fans about their levels of excitement for ports of their games coming over to Switch, and then they later admitted that the positive feedback well exceeded their expectations. So, who knows, it could happen. But until then, at least we have what seems to be an incredible game on the way with Persona 5 Scramble. Also on Monday, we learned from Video Game Chronicles that Retro Studios has recently hired 2 new environment designers for the development of Metroid Prime 4. Mark Capers, who came over from nearby Playful Studios, the studio responsible for Super Lucky's Tale and New Super Lucky's Tale on the Switch, as well as James Beach, who had previously worked on titles such as Crisis 3, Eternal Darkness 2, and DC Universe Online. So it's certainly nice to see things apparently moving along nicely for the development of Metroid Prime 4, but we're probably still a few years away from release. And it's also nice to see a former Playful Studios employee land such a high-profile gig, as I was pretty sad to hear about the recent downsizing over at Playful. And New Super Lucky's Tale is such a wonderfully nostalgic 3D platformer on the Switch. If you haven't checked that one out yet, I highly recommend it. On Tuesday, CD Projekt Red announced that their latest patch to the Switch version of The Witcher 3, lovingly known as Switcher, is now available worldwide. The 3.6 update brought over some pretty significant changes that made fans of the game quite happy. The changes include added touchscreen support, overall performance optimization and bug fixes, save file integration across GOG and Steam, that's a big one. And then last but not least, a wide variety of graphic options that can make the game look quite a bit better on the Switch. Anti-aliasing can now be disabled, and there's also a new sharpening tool, and the difference is quite noticeable. I'm pretty excited about this update. The anti-aliasing definitely made the image quality in docked mode pretty blurry, and while you'll definitely get more jaggies and shimmering with anti-aliasing turned off, I definitely prefer the overall sharper look as opposed to that Vaseline smear. I'm also looking forward to seeing the improvement with the mClassic upscaler I use on my docked Switch, as that's pretty good at reducing jaggies and improving overall image quality. And I'm actually working on another comparison video of some Switch games while using the mClassic, but for now I'll leave a link to my original quick and dirty comparison in the description below if you'd like to check that out for yourself. Tuesday, we finally got the word that there would be a new Nintendo Direct on February 20th, although one geared specifically towards Animal Crossing New Horizons. But this does lend credit to the rumors we discussed in last week's episode that specifically named February 20th as a date for the Animal Crossing Direct, but also said that we'd be getting a full general Direct in February as well. So, really hoping that all pans out and we see an announcement for this next Direct sometime next week. More Tuesday news, Nintendo announced a brand new Switch Lite color variant, Coral, which will be available on April 3rd, 2020. And the new color looks great. It's a somewhat pinkish hue of red. And I saw someone on Reddit make a pretty interesting observation about the Switch Lite color options and how they almost perfectly match up with the main protagonist from Fire Emblem Three Houses. You have the gray charcoal for Byleth, and then coral for Edelgard and the Black Eagles, turquoise for Dimitri and the Blue Lions, and then yellow for Claude and the Golden Deer. And this is probably just a total coincidence. The colors don't match up exactly, but Who knows, this could have been something Nintendo thought about for some reason. On Thursday, Capcom's Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening Special Edition launched on Switch to overall positive reviews, with fans of the series applauding the newly added freestyle mode, which lets players swap weapons on the fly, as well as co-op play being added to the game's Blood Palace challenges. Early Thursday morning, we got the Animal Crossing New Horizons Direct, and it was great. Now, I can totally understand if you're not an Animal Crossing fan, this Direct probably didn't do much for you, and I will say that I enjoyed the Direct much more on my second watch, as I was pretty dreary-eyed when I watched it immediately after my alarm went off just before 6 a.m. The Direct was presented in an adorable travel agency timeshare seminar format, and covered all sorts of details about what we can all expect from life on a deserted island. And we had seen some of this before, but we also got some new information that got me even more excited about New Horizons' release on March 20th. What really has me excited about New Horizons is the much higher levels of customization available for the outdoors and overall quality of life improvements. Being able to terraform the terrain, choose where residences and shops are placed, and place items outside is going to lead to far greater customization of your island town. And then the equipment wheel that lets you quickly switch between your most used items without having to navigate a menu, as well as bringing over the improved design interface from Happy Home Designer, all leads to a recipe that I think makes for an excellent progression of the series. It was also great to see that we'll be getting some use out of the Nintendo Switch Online app, and that owners of New Leaf and Happy Home Designer will be able to take pictures of QR codes of textile patterns they created in those games and easily import them over to New Horizons for the ability to decorate items with those custom patterns. My wife, who's a huge Animal Crossing fan, was also overjoyed to see that New Horizons will be compatible with the Animal Crossing amiibo cards that she went a little bit crazy buying a few years back. We also learned that holidays and events would be tied to free updates rather than being already baked into the game, and I think it makes sense why Nintendo went that route. The internet is a very different place than when New Leaf was released, and locking the special events behind updates should mitigate hackers from accessing the special event content early and spoiling it for everyone else by posting to Reddit or etc. Now, I certainly have to mention the ongoing confusion and concern around the way New Horizons will handle save data, and honestly, this was the one detail that was holding me back from being fully overcome with hype about this game. I usually use my Switch Lite as my portable console and then play on the TV on my mostly permanently docked OG Switch. And I was really bummed that it appeared if I wanted to play in both portable mode and on the big screen, I would need to have a separate island on each system. And with how many hours you can sink into a town in Animal Crossing, this was certainly not ideal. And while Nintendo remains somewhat vague about all of this, it looks like there is hope on the horizon. Nintendo is holding strong that players will only be able to recover lost or damaged save data once, with some sort of functionality separate from cloud saves, but a screenshot from Nintendo UK's website eased my primary concern about this game. As you can see from the second paragraph here, Nintendo will be rolling out some sort of option to let players transfer their save data between consoles, and that functionality will be rolling out later this year. As long as that's the case, those of us with a primary and secondary Switch, or those who plan on upgrading to a newer system in the future, are in luck. It would hopefully work just like Pokemon Sword and Shield do. You aren't able to back up your save over the cloud, but you can transfer your data between systems. And that's all I needed to hear. Let the hype levels resume. On Friday, we learned that Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition was officially rated in South Korea for sale in the country. Now, ratings don't always mean that the game is immediately on the horizon, but it is usually a pretty good indicator that it is on the way. So hopefully we will see a release date for this game sometime soon. It's one of the only major releases we know of other than Animal Crossing New Horizons and then Breath of the Wild 2, which may not even be coming in 2020. So maybe we'll see more in that direct that hopefully lands next week. All right. That does it for this week's current Nintendo news. Definitely a lot more going on this week than last, but before we go, it's time for 20 years ago today, where we take a look back at what was happening with Nintendo 20 years ago this week. Now, this week we're covering a game that came out on the Nintendo 64 on February 23rd, 2000, and had a pretty terrible reception across the board. NBA In the Zone 2000. Konami's In the Zone 2000 was one of many basketball games to be released that year, but apparently one of the worst, as Rob Smolka, who reviewed the Nintendo 64 version of the game for Next Generation, rated it 1 star out of 5 and stated that, quote, "This game manages to eke out a score of 1 star only because our rating system doesn't go any lower." Ouch. I never played this one, but apparently it suffered from really terrible animations and awkward player models and just an overall lackluster feature set. But I'd be really curious to know in the comments below if any of you out there have played this game. Maybe it was a game you played during your childhood, and I certainly know I was a lot more forgiving towards bad games when I was much younger. I remember my friends and I staying up really late to play through Nagano Winter Olympics on the Nintendo 64, which I'm pretty sure was an awful game, but we had fun with it, so I guess that's all that matters. And if you stuck around through all that and like what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next week, have a great weekend, play some video games, start packing for that deserted island getaway, and I'll see you next time.